For my fourth session of day one South by Southwest, I had the opportunity to attend How to Break Through as a New Brand in the Cluttered Beauty Industry, which topic, fashion and beauty, which has related to my flipboard that I've been working on this semester. Originally looking at the schedule, I signed up for a lot of these fashion and beauty innovation because I was just more so curious, and a lot of them also connect to entrepreneurship, which was my undergrad major. So I wanted to check out not only these advancements in fashion and beauty, but also how they aspire as a female entrepreneur. So, kind of like a little bit like a background here, which I think is important. Like, the makeup industry has boomed. Like, the makeup industry has always been there, but with specifically TikTok and the media and the influence, it has just took off over the past 2-3 years. Like, one girl posts one thing, it's sold out. Like, you can't even go to the store and get it. Like, that is the effect we are experiencing. I said in my notes, it is a chokehold. Like, these influencers have young girls from like 12 years old to 50 years old, like, in a chokehold over what products they should use, and just showing the hefty weight of these influencers. Now, this specific panel focused on Dibs, and Dibs is a new makeup brand. I'm familiar with it. I don't have any of the products. I've never tried any of their products, but I know what it is. And Dibs came out like 2-3 years ago through like Tula Skincare. When like the current CEO, she used to work for Tula Skincare, and she hit like 7 figures in sales in one day for Tula Skincare. And she's like, wait, I can like do this like on my own. And she quit and started Dibs with some help from Tula there. But now Dibs has completely like rewrote the story and broken down like this entire wall of the makeup industry, and is now a global renowned brand. They're also, the CEO is local to Austin, so that was also a cool aspect. But my takeaways from the session, which I'll more so touch on, is that they have to take a lot of risks. A lot of makeup products in the industry are the same, for lack of better words. They've had to make super risky decisions, most of which paid off. And I hate to call that luck almost. Like, I think they are extremely strategic and they have their mind in the right spot. But I do think a lot of business decisions that they touched on were more so risky than strategically thought through, and they almost got lucky in that regard. But on the flip side of that, take the risk, and with a lot of grit and a dang good idea, it might just work. So like, that's the entrepreneur in me, like taking that away. And a big section that I want to hit on next is, they're like, why does Dibs work? Like, if there are like copycats, or it's hard to break out like different shades and stuff, like, why would Dibs be a standout? Like, they're entering 2 years ago to an industry that's been around forever. And they're co-CEOs, and the biggest thing that they both said is to be around. Their customer service aspect is insane. The satisfaction leads to retention and just like overall efficiency for them as an operation. They said, for example, they are always on their phones. Like, they don't live a 9-to-5 job. Like, if there's an email blast that needs to go out at 11:30 to handle communications, they do it. And she's like, and that's what like every entrepreneur should take in as that regard. Like, when you're trying to make your own brand and like trying to build your own stuff up, like, your job doesn't stop at 4:59. And I really liked like the grit that she displayed in that too. For example, in that, Dibs has trained their staff to always be around. Like, it's just a normal cultural like factor for them. They're constantly checking the data, and they have Shopify, which is like the third-party app where you can order like other products, but they use it to see like what products are selling, where they are selling, how much of selling. And the co-CEO named Tristan, he was like, I'm on it every 15 minutes, if not earlier. Like, I am constantly seeing like what is selling out, where, why, when, just trying to grab as much as they can. And then the other gal, so like one's more like lawyer, business, strategy, and then one's more like creative. And that's exactly what it's heading into, is creative satisfaction. She says that she does not have a product like out there that she does not think is perfect. Now, that doesn't mean it's not scrutinized by the public, but like, she thinks it is perfect. And her biggest piece of advice was, don't be on the coattail of someone else to dilute your brand. Like, you either need to be the newest, like the fastest, or the best. And those are like the three things that like I'm going to take away there when coming up with a need and trying to solve this problem as an entrepreneur. The new, the best, or different nonetheless. So I was like, I really liked what she said about that. And then like heading into that, like my perspective is like you kind of have to like cast a wide net and like see what you reel in that regard, while also having like this like hefty responsibility and like holistic view on how to make sure like everything meshes together. And that was something that was a challenge for them, is like, I want to do this, like let's cast our net. Oh, like there's a need for that, there's a need for that, there's a need for that, but like holistically did it like match up as a brand. So they had to like constantly go back, workshop. Same thing with customer like satisfaction and customer service there. Listening, they listen to their customers in order to have like this constant engagement and reinvent themselves. And another really interesting part to kind of like wrap up here that I wanted to just talk about for a minute is they talk about the socioeconomic factors that play in. So for example, like Dibs makeup products are probably like $35 plus, like $35 being cheap, like probably like $45 plus, right? That's a lot, like to have a tube that's like that big, like just for makeup, like that's a lot for like one product, when like women are constantly putting on like 5+ products on their face every single day, right? And their view on that, for lack of better words, is that people are still elastic. Like a lot of people right now are blaming socioeconomic factors, and then they said, quote for quote, but we're still spending money on Taylor Swift and the Super Bowl in this economy. So no matter what the macroeconomic factors are, their customers are almost emotionally attached to their products because it unites them in the way they feel, and they have a very strong loyalty in that regard, which I can tap into. Like I have seen it like on my phone and whatnot, like even though I'm not a user, I have seen that like they have had a super consistent brand over the past 3 years. Like beauty trends come and go, but they've been extremely consistent. On the flip side of that, I think they've done a really good job of like scaling their brand, and they said that like we're not a 50-state customer. So it's like, who is the customer? Well, the customer is everyone, and like people say that, but like they don't know what you mean by that, because it's like, how can you really narrow, like you have to have like a little bit, but she was like, seriously, like we try to scale it very intentionally, where we're making people almost like feel, like I said, that emotional attachment to it, where it's either you're feeling like more confident or like making me feel better, because that's how they, well, it's like, for lack of better words, like that's how they get you. That's like to invest in their products. They said that they've had everyone like like within their products, from all the way from like pop culture and influencers down to their own grandmothers who don't wear makeup. So I do think that they've done a really good job of showing that inclusivity overall. On a side note, so like my biggest takeaways there are, you can be an everyone brand if it is done right. Sometimes risky business pays off, sometimes it doesn't. Always be available to customers and have that creative satisfaction. Don't dilute that brand. Find a need and solve it. And just a super interesting point to touch on, they were a little bit full of themselves. And someone asked like a question about like how they got like funding, and all this, and they were like, oh, we just like asked our friends. And the one girl who's co-CEO was like, well, when I was at Berkeley, and the guy was like, well, when I was a lawyer, and they just seemed like a tiny bit like out of touch. So that was a really interesting thing to also take away from the panel, is like they kind of like they made jokes that like weren't funny and like didn't land well to the audience. A lot of people got up during the session and left, which I know like can be for multiple reasons, but I do think they have a really good value proposition of what's going on here, and there were a lot of like key takeaways and new perspectives, but they were almost hard to listen to because they seemed extremely like out of touch with reality and the normal American consumer. So just a little side note there, but overall I did like enjoy this session and those takeaways, just a little bit of balance there, kind of keeping that grain of salt with what they said, but nonetheless very helpful, like industry-wide and helpful advice.